Welcome to the Creating Resilience video series. There are 25 videos in this complete series. You can watch one or all of them. They are put in order in a sequence that I will explain. And the purpose is really to help everybody have their own awareness, to be able to reflect on your life and your emotions and your body, and be able to really connect with yourself and others in a strong, purposeful way. Because I do believe that our positive interactions will have a ripple effect on the world. I am a mom of two grown sons, and I was a school counselor for 17 years in a school system. I have a lot of experience working with children and families, and I created a business to help work with schools and agencies. And as I did that, the agencies and schools explained to me that, wow, you can really create something for individuals to really learn about their brain and their body and their emotions and how it all ties together. And that if we don't really understand it, we might not have the physical health that we really desire. So I've created this video series to help everybody have greater awareness and understanding about themselves and the world and how we all interact. It begins, unfortunately, with stress because stress is in everyone's life. Stress is anything that's unpredictable. It can be small. For instance, I'm not sure what I'm going to have for dinner tonight, all the way up to very catastrophic, I don't know where I'm going to live anymore. I don't have a house, or so and so has left me and I don't know what to do. And that unpredictability makes us feel a sense of loss, a loss of control. The longer the stress goes on, the more vulnerable we begin to feel. We begin to feel like we don't have control, that nothing is predictable, and that stress increases in us. This is our brain's way of interacting with the environment around us when it's unpredictable. There are three responses to stress. We can have a very positive response to stress. This is when we get very curious about what's happening. We might go into problem-solving mode or kick ourselves right into action. So, for example, getting ready to do this video series was a little bit of stress, but I use it in a very positive way. How did I want to do it? How was I going to address it? What were we going to do? We can also have tolerable stress in our life. And that's when we have unpredictable things happening in our life. We have a very strong support system and we have resources. Those can be knowledge resources or they can be physical resources. But it becomes very toxic stress when we're in a situation and we don't have the support and we don't have the resources. For example, think about somebody that's new to town, a single mom with her child, and she has some friends and she gets a job and she gets her child into daycare and she has insurance on her car and she gets in a car wreck and she has friends that can come pick her up. She has insurance to help pay for things. She can get her child still to daycare and she can still go to work with help from her friends. But if that same mom comes to a city and she knows absolutely nobody and she has no resources to fall back on and she gets into a car accident, she might have to beg the tow truck driver to pick up her child from daycare and take her back to her home. But eventually she can't get to work. She can't get her child to daycare and things start to fall and get really out of control. And you can see how that can become toxic without support and resources. So our human brain has three main pieces that we will continually talk about in this training. There's the survival brain, that's the brainstem, and this is the part of our brain that runs every single part of our body. It makes our lungs breathe and our heart beat and our eyes blink and our stomach digest food. What this part of the brain is constantly doing is adapting to the environment around us. So if you're really cold, if it's cold outside, you're going to shiver, and that's your body's reaction to the cold. This is also the part of the brain that if your brain senses any threat or danger, it throws out chemicals and hormones that make you go into what's called fight, flight, or freeze. And so if we feel a strong threat, we'll either get ready to fight that threat, to run from it, or it might be so bad that we actually faint on the ground. And that's great because these are instinctive reactions that have helped us survive for years. These instinctive reactions to heat and to cold and to hunger, all of that has kept us alive for years. So the other part of the brain we'll talk about a lot is the emotional brain, which is also called the limbic system. And there's multiple parts in this part of the brain. It's what's literally right between your ears. This is where your emotions are housed. So if I put you into an MRI scanner and showed you things that make you really happy or really scared or really sad, the neural connections in that part of your brain would really be working hard, and we could see that on the MRI. We also hold all of our memories in this part of our brain, and not just our memories that we've learned things like colors and numbers and things like that, but our episodic memories, so things that we've gone through. So if I've been in a car accident on a certain part of the road, when I get to that certain part of the road, my memory tells me, well, link that to the fear that you felt. And so those emotions and those memories are linked together. And they're also linked together through things that we see, smell, taste, hear, or feel. So with driving down the road, that would be connected to my sense of sight. And I would see where I had been before, feel the fear, and that's all tied to my memories. And what's really important is in this part of the brain, there's a small thing called the amygdala. I call it the watchtower, and it's constantly scanning the environment around us for something that might be a threat or a danger. And if it senses a threat or a danger, just senses it, it's going to send that signal down to that survival brain and shoot out the fight, flight, or freeze response. So it's really important to understand that these two parts of the brain work really closely together to instinctively react to what's going on around us in our environment. And they work with the senses, they work with our emotions, and they work with our memories. The third part of the brain we'll talk a lot about is the thinking brain. It's the very, very front part of our brain. It doesn't even start developing until we are 3 to 5 years old. And it holds what we call the executive functions. That is working memory, the ability to learn something here and use it over there. Flexible attention, where you can shift your attention from one thing to the other. And then inhibitory control, which a lot of people call self-control. And those executive functions allow us to make plans and to thoughtfulully respond and to make good decisions. And that's the thinking part of the brain. That's where I want you guys to be when you're listening to these videos. It's definitely where you want me to be while I'm creating them. But we can't always just stay in the thinking part of our brain because it's linked to the other two parts of our brain. Since our brain is really built for survival, if we have a heightened emotion, or if that watchtower sends a signal of threat down to the survival brain, our thinking brain actually goes a little bit offline. If you've ever done something like yell at somebody and say something really mean when you're angry, and then later you're like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? Well, you weren't thinking in that moment because your brain was prioritizing the emotion and the possible reaction you would have to have if there was a threat. So you weren't thinking in that moment. That's really, really important. And we'll talk more about that as we go forward, because that has a lot to do with how our brains develop when we're really little. The key piece of this video I want you to remember is that our survival brain and our emotional brain are where we instinctively react to the environment around us. And our thinking brain is where we can thoughtfully respond. So every video in this series will have a reflection question for you. Just kind of sit back and think about the content and yourself. And then it will also have an action step, something that I'm calling you to do So you put the knowledge into action, because you can listen to this video and I can create this video to share knowledge. But unless you actually put that knowledge into action, we haven't really done anything together. So your reflection question is, what do you see when someone around you is having a high emotion or is experiencing flight, fight, or freeze reactions? So think about what you see, what behaviors you might see. How would you know that they're having a high emotion or a fear reaction? And your action step is this: pay really close attention to yourself in different situations to see if you can identify if you are reacting or responding. Thank you so much for spending time with me on this first video of this series. I hope you'll join me for the rest.